pride with the county, Eric Johnson at UPA, and many, many others. With the Biomedical Corridor here right in the heart of the city, it really puts Akron in the forefront of developing a new identity almost around the world as we see more innovators in medicine, biomedical research, and materials handling. And I think the corridor really blends our expertise in helping companies with the important expertise that Dr. Ritzman represents, the technical knowledge and understanding of how things work and how they can improve the systems that obviously so many of us depend on. I can only tell you, having had a microdiscectomy, your description of young children having multiple back operations is beyond belief for me, and it really probably hits home with me. Now, if you can do something with old guys and their joints, then the next step, that would be a good thing too. We really, I'm going to cut this short. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing, but I think this was beginning many years ago when, before I was mayor, we saw the necessity to start an incubator to really start to nurture startup companies, and that struggle that they have to take an idea, actually first understand that there's a problem and then an idea on how to solve that problem, which clearly the partnership here has presented. We recognized many years ago, and the #1 incubator in the country, our Akron Business Accelerator, staffed with professionals with entrepreneurial experience, business experience, to help nurture those businesses, was really the sort of start of this whole idea of looking at the next wave. We were an industrial power, but people who sit on their laurels and don't understand the changing nature of our world, especially now in this generation, where when we say world, we mean it, places in faraway China and others that are creating new technology, we need to step forward. And so I look forward to working with Dr. Douglas and ABIA to build a biomedical incubator as one of our next projects, to recognize the special needs of biomedical companies, different than many of the industrial needs of our growing startup companies in the incubator. We need to nurture the startup new homegrown companies, but I hope that everyone someday will recognize the need to continue this process that we've started to welcome others from across the globe. And it probably isn't as well known here, but Bob Bowman and his staff have really created these wonderful, we were calling them bridge relationships, to help encourage startup companies with high-tech solutions, as you have created here from Israel, Helsinki. The newest one is Bad Wittenberg in Germany, which is a center of medical research in Germany. So I look forward to working with companies like Apto Ortho, and I certainly want to congratulate you on the wonderful story that you've told here today, how a difficult problem that we can understand and personalize, and then looking for that solution, and it was created right here. This gives us great hope, not only for this problem, but for other people to follow, Dr. Steve Fenning and Dr. Todd Ritzman, as they take a good idea and develop it into a good product that then creates the jobs here. And that's really what this is all about. I congratulate everyone involved in this, all of the partners. It once again highlights what I just described to our visitors from Milwaukee, who were here last night at a dinner, that I do not know of a single community in this country, maybe the world, that has a collaborative spirit that transcends the boundaries and the silos in many cities and gets things done. And this is a great example, and so I congratulate Dr. Douglas and all of the partners at ABIA, certainly Steve and Todd, and I wish you the very best, because your solution not only can be identified as the assistance and better life that you describe for young people, but it also means families here who will be supported by the jobs that this creates. So I thank you and congratulate you, wish you the very best. And while I would like to say that I could answer every question about the technology involved here, I can't. I know something about jobs, but I know a gentleman who can handle those questions. I'm going to bring Dr. Douglas back up for the Q&A part.
So the Q&A session is open.
What's the meaning behind the word apto?
Apto is Latin for to adjust or to adapt. And so we're looking at this company as ways to non-invasively adjust or adapt orthopedic implants. Some of those, like this first case, is a pediatric implant, but we're not limited to just pediatric patients. So Apto is Latin for adjust or adapt. Sure, the magnetic technology that we have, we also see as a platform technology. And so the first application of this is for the scoliosis screw, as you've seen. We think that there's many other applications where we need to use the same magnetic technology to non-invasively adjust or adapt implants. We also see that there's lots of opportunity with biomaterials, maybe coming out of the University of Akron, that we can somehow actuate, maybe in a totally different way, maybe not magnetically, that can also adjust or adapt.
The reason I asked Steve to make that additional comment is to give you a sense. The truth of the matter is that if we thought that this was the only application that this had, we probably would not have been having this big opening. But this is really a platform technology that gives the possibility of more applications and hence more products and more jobs. And in fact, when you have a technology platform, it increases your chances of success. So this is part of the excitement.
What's a realistic time frame by which this device could be put into practice, realizing you're in the beginning stages of all of this? And what does it mean in terms of jobs if there's commercialization of the product? Could there be people manufacturing, making the product here in Akron, and how many people could it bring in, that type of thing?
Steve?
Let me answer the first part of that question with regards to the timeline on the development of the technology. As with all technologies in this particular space that are referred to as Class 2 technologies by the FDA, there's a process that we'll need to go through. We're fully aware of that. It starts with defining how we want that technology, that technology that will impact scoliosis. What we want that to look like. And we're still in the throes of the design side of that, as Steve alluded to earlier. And then from there, we will have to go into bench trials, as again, Steve mentioned, partnering with the University of Akron and others to do that. And then we'll need to go through animal trials. And then there's the FDA process that we'll have to go through. So typically on these kinds of devices, you're looking at a few years. Our mindset here is that we want to get technologies to the market as quickly as possible, but you can't force the FDA to move your product ahead at a pace that we want it. It has to be done pragmatically. So my expectation and our expectation is that we're probably looking at a couple of years to 3 years before we can really start thinking about monetizing the technology. But I won't go into detail on it, but there are a number of ways that we can do that, not just in terms of Apto Orthopedics being its own standalone company and getting involved in sales and marketing and distribution and those things, but partnering with larger industry companies that can move that technology forward perhaps more rapidly. With regards to job creation and economic growth, I think if you look at, and I'll just take that one also, I think if you look at typically the history of job creation in startup companies in our space, early on, we clearly need to be lean and mean. And so our intent is not to hire a bunch of folks that can help us move this along, because the ABIA gives us that power to do that. And certainly in concert with our partners, we have all of the resources we need. So expectations are that over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, we'll have a limited number of people involved in the project. But once we move beyond that 2 or 3 year period where we can look at monetizing, then you're looking at, as you mentioned, partnering with manufacturing companies here in this region and others that can move the technology forward.
The question was, what's the size of the market and how many children go through annually?
So this early onset scoliosis accounts for maybe 10 or 20% of all children with scoliosis. So the majority, as I said earlier, are adolescent patients. And so this subgroup is a bit of an orphan group, which is why there's not a lot of robust innovation, because there's not a lot of industries that want to chase it. So maybe somewhere in the realm of 500 to 1,000 new procedures a year. And then you add the length things at 6-month intervals, that gives you an idea of the volume. We have probably 20 or 30 patients at some point in this process at our institution. And so it's not a remarkably high number. However, interestingly, given the frequency of the serial surgeries, there was a study that just looked at 13 patients that had this dual growing rod surgery. They had an average of almost 8 surgeries each, ranging from 5 to 11 within the group. And the total cost of that study, and this was published some time ago, so not inflation adjusted, the total cost of that study was nearly $4 million. That cost of healthcare for 13 patients. And so extrapolate that by 500 or 1,000 a year, and it adds up very quickly. And so, again, I'm going to put that dual hat on again. So there's certainly societal costs. There's cost to insurers and cost to institutions and hospitals. I think remarkably more important is the psychosocial cost, though. And so, again, empathizing with these children, these families. There's been a recent evidence to show that there are dramatic psychosocial effects on these children's upbringing. Understandably, I don't know how I'd go through that and develop the same way I did with the Norton, Ohio upgrowing I had here. It would have remarkably changed things. But there's also studies that show that there are actually learning disabilities with multiple repetitive general anesthetics. And so that's cost we can't quantify, which frankly I think is a lot more valuable than $1 billion or $200 million. And so I think the cost savings is extraordinary.
Yes, sir.
Is there a date for this device yet? No, but where is it in the process of patent pending?
There is no name yet for the device itself. However, Apto Orthopedics, we're in the process of trademarking Apto Orthopedics. We have filed our first provisional around the original technology, and just yesterday we filed a second provisional patent around further development of the technology, more as it relates to extending the spine or elongating the spine. So we're working, again, I'm happy to say, with a local law firm to handle all of our IP work. And then I think it's also important to recognize that this is a partnership between the ABIA and Akron Children's Hospital, and we're delighted because Akron Children's is really the shining star here in Akron as far as we're concerned relative to pediatric patients, and certainly in comparison to so many other institutions across the country. It really is from our perspective, a gold mine in terms of its clinical capabilities and its ability to innovate. We're just starting to tap into that. But in all likelihood, we'll be working with them on developing the ownership side of the company as we go forward, and that should be information on that should be forthcoming over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Let's clarify that. So it's ABI and Akron Children have ownership stakes?
Yes, they will. Those numbers are not yet defined, but they certainly will.
And is it also located here for now?
Absolutely. The company, which may lead to the next question in terms of management of the company will be managed out of the Medical Device Development Center. Dr. Fenning and I, along with Dr. Ritzman, certainly will be handling all of those issues related to getting a startup company up and running, at least in the interim. And then as we move forward, we'll make decisions on how that management structure will look.
Time for one more question. There being none, we thank you for joining us in this really exciting milestone. Thank you very much.